Do, 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 do. Welcome to the Friends with Benefits podcast, a business podcast about revenue-generating partnerships, not a podcast about business time with friends. We're your co-hosting couple. I'm Jason.
And I'm Sam. Welcome to the show, friends.
Welcome back to the show, friends. We are back with another amazing episode. The guests just keep getting better and better and better. This week, we are honored to have a friend. I feel like I say this every week, but a true friend to all the partners. This guy really is the friend to all the partners as he's building the place for partners. I don't think he really needs much of an introduction, but we've got a guy who's been around the block. He's built partnerships from all sorts of different angles in the world. Now building communities. The only guy I've been on a Zoom call with where I got swarmed by bees. True story. We'll talk about that. Welcome to the show, Chris Samila.
Jason, so good to be here. Thank you for the wonderful intro. I'm blushing. So it's a real pleasure.
We're honored to have you, man. And right before we were recording, Sam and I were talking about the bee thing. And for those listening at home, I was sitting on my back porch. Chris and I were on a Zoom, and I hear what sounded to be like a helicopter coming behind me, and Chris saw my face kind of contort. I believe you may have seen something, but it was a literal swarm, hive, cloud of bees.
Yeah, I thought it was like a Zoom anomaly, like there was some artifact on the screen. I was like,
AI.
And then, and then this swarm of bees attacked you. And it was a surreal experience.
And a third perspective from the story, I was sitting in this seat and I hear screaming from outside. So
all I could imagine was like Macaulay Culkin and My Girl, and that was it for me, man. I was like just running inside for my life.
I'm Googling, is our will done?
Carried away. Anyway, that's, we're far away from the topic at hand, but, we've got some history, so glad to have you.
Good to be here.
All right, Chris, we like to start the podcast by asking all of our guests what the term friends with benefit means to you in the context of business partnerships.
Yeah, so I think this one's, it's a great question because I think the essence of partnerships is something where it should be, there's bidirectional value that should be passed back and forth to both parties. I was literally on call right before chatting with y'all with somebody talking about this specific topic, which is so many of the, especially bigger partner programs, it's just like you're in a machine and it's just, you're part of these processes, and there's a lack of like the human element to a lot of it. And some of it's challenging because there's only so many resources that go around, but it feels like in recent years there's been a refocus on like, how do you create that great partner experience? But at the core of it is like, there's a human usually on both sides, partner managers, that there's some win there, whether it's one party's getting branding exposure, the other one's getting source deals. Like there's got to be something that's bidirectionally helpful, because the world of partnerships has changed. It's like not all the partners are what we call historically transactional partners, where you're getting paid as a reseller to hawk some product. Like a lot of times, especially tech partner to tech partner, there's not a referral fee back and forth. And so you have to find other ways to help each other and support each other. And that's create a lot more surface area of like, how do you create value for each other?
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And I'm going to pull something out of that because I want it recorded. Is that you said it's basically the human element within inside of business relationships. And like, I love that approach, that talk track there is like, there really is, to your point, like this human aspect that we forget about. And I've been high on this kick that right now with all these layoffs, we have a trust attrition issue. We're not looking at the human element that's in these business relationships and what we as partner people can bring to the table within that relationship. And so, yeah, the SaaS world or the business world as a whole is changing due to the partnerships.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I think the number of layoffs in our industry has been painful to watch. We've seen this through partnership leaders and the number of people that are open to work. And I've definitely been thinking a lot about like, what happens to all these companies when you lose all this talent? And it's like the narrow view of what those partner people were doing might have been like, oh, they generated this many deals, or they, did this many webinars. But it's like, as everyone knows that does this job, there's months, if not sometimes years of relationship building to get to the point where you have these highly efficient partner programs and it's like in partnerships. And so like losing that talent and all that like built up sort of karma and social equity is like, that's painful to try to rebuild that. And it'll hurt companies that have let go of their partner teams.
Well, and it's not immediately transferable either. It's you don't put a new person in that seat and they can immediately pick up where the last person dropped off. To your point, there's social equity there, and those things take time.
100%.
Yeah, and I think back to last week's guest, Mr. Snyder over at Sendoso, right? He's kind of like you, Chris, been around for a while doing this partnership thing. He brings a wealth of a network to the table wherever he goes, and so like you're bringing that and you're establishing trust for them on behalf of that company. So if something goes awry there and you lay them off, like they're gonna have way more trust in the individual of Corey or yourself than they are in the company. So something happens, and like that's where we're getting this trust attrition. So let's talk a little bit about what you're building right now with partnership leaders, and I think most of our listeners are going to know what that is, what you guys are up to, and in the context of friends with benefits and the human element, like you guys are quite literally fostering relationships. It's pretty much what building community is all about. To make people better at what they do, to provide a place for enablement and empowerment within their roles, right? So how do you guys focus on continuing building purpose-built relationships and driving the progression of those relationships, so it's not just like transactional and like me reaching out to you, hey, do you have a reseller form I can use, kind of thing, which is a real thing I've done.
Yes, you've been a great PL member. You've been leveraging the community to get things done, which I love to see. Yeah, this is kind of like I've been thinking a lot about this recently because we are entering like a new era for partnership leaders. And for context, anybody who's not familiar with it, we're in essence like a blend of like a community and an industry association that also dabbles in industry research and physical and digital events. There's a lot of different facets to PL, but the goal is to really help people build build great partner programs and become great partner leaders. And so like the early days of PL, it was in essence a lot of the like direct relationships, specifically in sort of like the MarTech SaaS space. It was like we started the community and everyone sort of knew each other, or at least was like one connection away. And we just finished this European tour where we visited a whole bunch of cities, and it was fascinating meeting folks in the partnerships world that some of them weren't even in the SaaS industry. They were in, aeronautics or car manufacturing. And so like, this is forcing us as partnership leaders because, it's not just a home for SaaS partner professionals. Our goal is to be a home for any partner professional. So we're thinking a lot about like, how do we, when we have lots and lots of people in here, how do we make this a warm, welcoming home for all these folks, no matter what their background is? And so you started to see over time, we've broken into different seniority levels in partnership leaders so that, a VP has the chance to meet other VPs and share confidential, really challenging problems. And same thing for ICs, managers, and CXOs. So there's been like seniority segmentation, but also industry segmentation. So we're trying to like get HR folks to collaborate together, meet each other, fintech, cyber, et cetera. So we've like, if you kind of back up and think about what's happening in the world with like LinkedIn, it's almost like this like unbundling of LinkedIn that's occurred where you have communities like partnership leaders that, are serving different professional personas, but within those communities, you have sub communities. Women in partnerships is another great example of this, where we try to like create environments so that it does feel like you can know everyone and build some relationships. And there's some psychology of how many people that, that can fall into, and tech companies built their offices in Silicon Valley based on those numbers and stuff. But like, there's that we've seen this come true where it's like, you got to create these micro communities or sub communities within the broader context of our community, so that it feels more human and it doesn't feel as daunting. Cause especially if you're new at partnerships, you look around and the members in PL and you're like, okay, this is like, some of these people have been doing this for a while. It can feel a little scary to ask questions sometimes about something that, there's probably 50 other people that have the same question, but they're also nervous to maybe ask that same thing. So we spend a lot of time thinking about like, how do we create that kind of safe zone for people to meet each other and share things.
Is there anything that you're finding that's working, that's creating that engagement, that's nurturing that relationship? It's like I feel like there's kind of a parallel path that some of us that are managing larger scale partner programs can take from this, right? How to create engagement with your partners, how to build those meaningful relationships, and how to take it beyond just the hey, who do you know that I should know kind of thing.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So I was talking to Adrienne Coburn yesterday from Oyster, and
She's fantastic.
Adrienne's great. If anybody hasn't met her here, go meet Adrienne. She's incredible. She's building the partner program at Oyster, and I was asking her like, how do you use PL? And she was talking about this concept of like she kind of like dips in and out of partnership leaders based on kind of what she needs, whether it's a business need or a personal need. Sometimes she just wants to make sure she has a strong network and is dialed in. I think like there's a direct corollary to how you think about managing a long tail of partners where you're not always going to have a partner that's going to be super engaged because they're busy working on other stuff. And so you got to have sort of authentic touch points with them that feeds them education or knowledge, which if you're a technology company, that's product news. But when I was a partner manager at Optimizely, I did this thing called shaking the tree where like I would literally send to my long tail of partners an email that I was like, here's all the latest industry news that I hope is relevant and is interesting to you. And like, I did that consistently enough that like I was in someone's inbox, and not in an annoying way, but like they remembered to come back and talk to us when the need, was prevalent for them. And I think for a community, we kind of think about the same thing is like, people have day jobs. PL is not your day job. So like, we have to be finding ways to engage with you that is easy, and that you can find stuff you need. I think it's the same way with managing your partner program, where we try to do this blend of like sort of programmatic, newsletters and things that are scheduled per se. But we also are hiring more sort of like CSMs, we call them member experience managers, that actually meet the members, spend time with them. And that's like the equivalency of like the partner managers. So it's kind of the same interface with, partner team working with the marketing or partner marketing team, and then combining that with the partner manager sort of human element component.
I love what you just talked about too, and how Adrienne kind of mentioned it. I was actually having a very similar conversation with somebody last week, and they're new to partnerships, they're new to partner leaders, and they were asking me like, how do I use it? How do I find value in it? And my question back to them is, what are your goals? Why are you building a partner program? What are you trying to accomplish? And that's going to help you articulate where to start, who to talk to, because similar to LinkedIn, like you can go to LinkedIn and you can meet anybody you want, but that's daunting. So if you can understand who you're trying to accomplish and find those sub-communities, it's going to be really helpful for you. And you guys have done a great job of setting that up for your members. So kudos.
I think that I love that, and I appreciate that feedback. I mean, I think the thing we've learned in community is that a lot of people are, and I sort of mentioned this earlier, is they're like a little bit nervous to engage in a public way. And like over and over again, the folks that actually like post in the public Slack channels or lean in and participate in blog posts or things that we can do to help build their professional brand, they get a lot more value out of it because other people who are working on the same thing want to reach out and engage with them.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's again sort of similarities to really great partners, where if you're visible and present, you ask questions and you're engaging, and it's not just like, hey, I got a deal, let's work on it, but it's like all the other stuff that goes around that. Like you're going to be just thought of more often and probably get more resources. And so if you're trying to especially partner with like a bigger company, like how can you try to get visible to the partner marketing team, to the solutions architects, to the partner managers, of course, but like build that, consortium of allies at your partner, because we all know that partner managers change jobs decently often because there's the reality of the world we're in right now. So it's like, if you have a really important partner and you're single threaded, that potentially is a dangerous situation for you, because as we mentioned earlier, all that sort of like history of all the goodness you've done could potentially go with the person who's leading that business.
Absolutely. So as a community leader, I have a question about, is it a priority for you, or how do you manage like elevating voices that maybe don't do that themselves so that it's not just an echo chamber of the same 10 people? Is that something you guys focus on or work on?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, this is something that we work on, because a lot of times, and you know, there are folks that they did not grow up in the Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn world. They've been in the industry and the professional world for longer than those things existed, and they maybe have not built their muscle on feeling comfortable sharing things in the same way that younger people may. And so, like, we hunt down and try to find folks where, like, okay, I'll meet with somebody, for example. I'm like, wow, you know a lot about something that we haven't seen people talk a lot about. I'm like, how can we get you out there and more visible? And like, the PL staff are constantly kind of doing that process where we're like, hey, what are you proud of that you've built in your partner program, or processes or things that were hard initially, but then you figured out really efficient ways to do it, so that we can collectively share that knowledge? Because unlike sales or marketing or even customer success, like partnerships, there's so many different types of partner programs, and it's changing so quickly because the tooling and the processes are literally every year. Like, if you leave our industry and come back in 18 months, like,
Completely different.
probably going to be in a very different environment than what you were in previously. And so, like, we definitely try to find folks that are not as vocal themselves and give them a platform of, like, the Partnership Leaders Content Network. We have 7, 8 different podcasts. We have multiple YouTube channels. We have blog posts. We have industry research. We have Catalyst. So there's, like, I'm really proud we have all these, like, ways now that we can help people get more visible. And so, yeah, like, we encourage you, if you're listening to this and, like, you haven't participated in one of those, like, reach out to us. Like, we'd love to hear from you, because, like, and there's so much value and goodness out of sharing those experiences, for the folks that are actually in the trenches building these programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have really, you've been elevating, partnerships as a whole. Like, I think, both of us have been a member since the early days, have taken a ton of value out of it. And, we've got some more questions around kind of like what you're seeing within that. But I want to stay on this kind of talk track for just a second. I love this kind of the parallel path of partner programs and community, right? Like, even when I was at Drift and Terminus, I treated my program as such, because you've got the typical 3 silos: your ISV, your strategic, Salesforce, whatever you want to call it, and your channel. The goal, even when I was at Drift, was to kind of bring them all together to create this one thriving ecosystem, if I may, and treat it as such, right? So, and that's our job, to build purposeful relationships and build that community, so to say. So you've done this as a partner program owner, full story, Optimizely, all the way back into, like, the green industry days, right? And now you're kind of, building these purposeful relationships via community, right? So, A, what have you taken from those experiences? And B, kind of how have you translated that into what your day-to-day looks like, right? So more so what I'm asking is, like, what does your day-to-day look like right now to do that, and how it relates to partner managers?
What's funny is we did Partnership Leaders for years before we actually worked on it full time. And then when I transitioned out of Crossbeam and worked on PL full time, it was like this magical moment where I was like, hey, great, I can, like, work on, this all day long, and just, and there's, it was really very freeing feeling. And I of course loved all the companies I've worked in on the tech side of things. But it's like, because the 3 founders are all business development partnership professionals, it's like we're constantly trying to figure out, how do we find a win-win with, like, service providers or tech companies, and it's like, so there's so much surface area of interesting partnerships that, like, we can just help each other. And so, like, that part of it is, like, super invigorating. I also manage our member experience side of the business, so, like, my lens to this comes through, like, what do our members need, and how do I connect somebody that can help them to that? I'll give you just one example. I was on a call yesterday with Spur Reply, which is a consultancy that helps partner teams. And we were just talking about, like, what are the things that you're really good at and the companies you've been helping, and, like, how do we transfer that into something we can, like, share with the community, so that, like, they can get better and get inspired and like, figuring out different ways to do that. And, whether it's roundtables or webinars or field events or Catalyst, it's, as a partner person, it's really fun. I feel like I'm still doing partnerships, but I'm also like, I've layered in this like CS motion, because like I've also had to learn how do we like help make the experience for everyone more sort of streamlined, but also consistent. Because we have some people like yourselves, like you've been in the PL since the early days, you're the OG, you kind of get how to interact, and you're not maybe nervous to reach out to people. But we have other people that join who have never been in Slack before. Like we've had 40 people from Microsoft join, partnership leaders.
Wow.
Oh, and they're asking for teams.
They're on teams. Yeah. Like, it's a different world. And so like, how do you navigate that? So like, there's some interesting stuff that we've had to like get really thoughtful about. How do we scale up our sort of like member engagement, CS motion, and making sure that, we have 1,500 people in here now. It's like, I don't get a chance to meet everybody. And so it's like, how do you create a personalized experience for them at scale through messaging, and we're actually using data now to help it kind of look at engagement and figure out like who's struggling, who hasn't logged in, all that kind of stuff. And thankfully the community tech space, if you think the partner tech space is immature, look at the community tech space. It's like wild west. It's not a lot. There's only a handful of companies that actually have tooling that is I'd say like enterprise grade. But we're starting to use these things. And so it's like, I think going back to kind of like what makes partner professionals just exceptionally valuable for any company is that like you are a chameleon. You're constantly changing colors and figuring out how to do new stuff. Like I've had to start figuring out how to do customer success, as well as all the partnership stuff. And I think like any great partner person is constantly kind of figuring out how to do stuff, especially in those like kind of army of one scenarios.
Absolutely. I love that. Be a chameleon. Okay, so you kind of touched on this. You left one of the hottest jobs in partnerships, we'll call it. You were building partnership tech for partner leaders. So literally doing business with people who get you. You were your ICP. That's the dream. So what learnings did you take from your time at Crossbeam about our industry as a whole? Biggest challenges, opportunities you see? How did that influence what you're doing at PL now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advent of things like Crossbeam, Reveal, Partner Tap, like these sort of account mapping technologies, I think have been wildly helpful to our industry in the sense that like it made partner data programmatic. And so you could actually be more efficient. My dream was, especially on the integration side, like taking that partner data and putting it into things like Marketo or other tooling to like make just the partner team and other departments more efficient around them. So I think like that piece from like a sort of aspirational, like really invigorating, like just made me happy as a partner professional, like working on those types of challenges. I think like one of the biggest learnings I had was just like that it across the board, a lot of partner teams lack partner ops resources. They lack the resourcing to get things done, to actually use that partner data in the way that they really want to. And so I think like as an industry right now, we're fighting hard to get the credit for the things we're doing. As we left the sort of transactional partner world of, it's relatively easy when you have a reseller or a distributor who's moving your widget, like you can point to the person that's making an impact. In the world of influenced revenue and tech partnerships and integrations and co-selling, managing that and tracking that and actually getting the credit for all the energy being expended is still really hard. And like there's today still not a tool that really does that end to end. And I think like as an industry, like until we make a lot of progress on that, we're still going to be fighting to get the credit we need. The good news is that like we do have venture capital firms that are telling their startups that like, or their the CEOs of these startups that like partnerships is the right competitive edge for you to scale correctly. And so you do see, we saw this actually in my time from I joined Crossbeam in I think it was late 2020. Like even in a time span of like the 2 years I was there, we did see like the venture capital community having an influence where like companies that are still seed or Series A, they're starting to think about partnerships, even if it's like a fractional partnerships person to bring into the business. Like that wasn't happening as often. I feel like 2020 and earlier, and so I think like that's really encouraging. But you can talk to anybody who's anybody who's listening to this, or talk to anybody in PL. Like, I still think a lot of us are fighting super hard to actually get the resources we need to do our jobs and to scale these programs. We're just not. Yeah, it's just we don't get the same love that other departments get today, I feel like.
Yet.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's great to see people like Scott Leese and some of these others, and to your point, like Justin Gray and Josh Wagner, what they're doing in revenue capital. Like, they want to invest in a company unless they have a partner strategy, right? And you've got people like Scott Leese, who's one of the top sales voices on LinkedIn, talking about partnerships and nearbound. So like we're slowly pushing this thing to the tipping point. We're not quite there yet, but it's getting closer, and it's really great to see. It's also very, very helpful in pushing your program strategy forward.
I mean, like the whole, how do you describe the value of the partnership teams bring, and the whole nearbound concept, and being able to like put this in terms that the marketing team and the sales team and the CS team understands how they might want to be interfacing with a partner team. Like, I feel like we've made good strides on that in the last 2 years in a way that like just hasn't happened as much prior. And it's this interesting moment in time where there's like because SDRs are less effective than they used to be, and because marketing is more expensive, like it's our time to shine as a sort of a department. But I'd say like Sam, to your question of like what else I learned, I think a lot of especially like heads of partnerships and even VPs of partnerships, they're striving to be able to like do things that are just like best way to describe it is like executive level training. I think is like things that they need. Like, how do you read a P&L, and like how do you stand toe to toe with your CFO and ask for the things that you need and defend that in a very data driven way? Like, that's one of the most vibrant sort of conversation areas we see for some of the more senior partner people. And it's just like, it's also like a massive opportunity, because like the faster we can solve for that, the more resources we're going to get. But it's like, it's kind of like it seems to be a very common challenge is some of the folks are missing some of the skills they need to kind of fight those battles inside their companies.
I think that's a really valid point. I personally am feeling that now. I'm having deja vu to many of the conversations we've had with like, we talked to Mason Cosby, and his whole thing was like, how do you build a team around you to support the places where you're not as strong? And I think that's one of the most valuable skills you can have as partner leaders too. And, Mike Stalker's his 4 pillars of partnerships. It's like, how do you go to your individual orgs within your company, improve value so that their resources become yours? And that in and of itself is a skill. And then you add on top of it, driving revenue, building marketing strategy, talking to your CFO, asking for a budget. And like, yes, you're a chameleon, and you have to learn how to prioritize, but it's tough out there.
Yeah. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with the chief strategy officer of a consultancy, and he was like, to some extent, like a chief channel officer or chief partnership officer almost has I wouldn't say harder job, but like maybe equally as hard a job as a CEO, because you do not have direct influence over the people you're asking for things from. Like you're using carrots and sticks with, you use the stick too hard because you need to feed them the carrot shortly after. Like, you kind of running around the business trying to build allies and stuff, but it's different than being the CEO. But you are, in essence, to some extent, a startup within a startup, being, leading a partner program inside a lot of these technology companies.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And doing it so with less resources, right? But still expected to hit the same amount of numbers and contribution to the company's goals.
Yeah, totally. And it's, I was heartened on that European trip to run into some folks that they were making massive impacts for their companies. Like, sometimes doing 30, 40, 50% of the revenue for the business. And some of it's also just regional specific, where like, if you're selling in the German market, they want a local partner that speaks German and things like that. And it's like, you see almost like interesting vibrancy to some of these partner programs in the European market. but like those stories don't, I think that those win stories aren't making it around the world in the same way. And that was like one of the things I was really intrigued by. I was like, how do we take what we learned? Because we did the same thing. We did an elevation tour in Australia, New Zealand. We learned a bunch of stuff down there. And it's like, how do you take the learnings and the challenges and stuff that people are getting through in these different regions and like share that with the other parts of the world? Because there is commonalities, I think, but there's also like, if you're a technology company, to some extent, you're going to be selling into one of these international markets at some point. And so it's like, how do you take the learnings? How do you operate, successfully in these markets and share that out to everybody else? Like, I feel like that's going to be something we spend time on next year in 2024 is like getting that sort of regional knowledge disseminated around the industry. Because it was surprising how different some of the strategies were to win some of these markets.
Super interesting.
I want to dig into so many things that you just talked about, which may be better for an offline question to learn from or take it to the PO community. But I kind of want to sit on the community thing for just a second. So you were building it at Full Story, moved into Crossbeam, started to get all these learnings and talking to all these programs, learning what's happening across the globe. At what point did you guys kind of realize that you had something and that you had to begin to invest more energy to get this to full time, and knew that you had to kind of take this community to the next level?
Probably a few different inflection points. So early on, so Ty, Asher, and I, from the very beginning, we were like, okay, this is cool. We're helping each other. This is, like it was emotionally fulfilling seeing folks help each other and stuff. And it was, pretty low complexity. And what we were doing is literally just kind of the Slack environment. And then COVID hit, and all of a sudden, because we started the community actually in December 2018. So 2019, steadily grew. And then March hit in 2020, and it was like, oh, okay, there's a lot of people joining. I was like, oh, our messages are going away. That sucks. So I was like, oh, Slack's business model is actually really smart. You need to pay for it to keep your history.
That
was
free
one
model.
Of that was kind of like one of the 20s. Like, hey, we got to like pay for this. And I was like, I'll just expense it. And I was like, I use this for partnerships at Full Story, and I went to go pay for it. I was like, oh, it's like $26,000. I was like,
That's going to be a hard one to justify.
I got some questions, Chris.
Yeah. So that was like, okay, well, we need to charge for membership so we can actually pay for Slack and maybe hire some people to help us do the admin side and stuff. Because we, in the early days, and we still do this, is like we make sure that people are actually in partnerships before they can join and that kind of thing. And so we needed to pay for tooling and processes. And so that's sort of like late 2020, moved, actually it was August 2020, shift over to a paid community was actually one of the best things that probably ever happened, because everybody who was kind of tire kicking, they didn't pay and they left. And the people that stayed were in it, and they were like really keen to build and help each other. And so like the engagement actually went up tremendously on the backside of moving to a paid model. And then we just kind of built from there. And if you fast forward to 2022, in the late spring of 2022, we realized that we love the Slack environment. We love the digital webinars. We love all that kind of stuff. But like the world was opening up again, and we were like, we could probably do a physical event somewhere. And we took a major bet, and we totally bootstrapped. We literally just rented the Miami Beach Convention Center, and like major high fives to the Reveal team. Like they were like, hey, like we'll support this. They became the title sponsor. And it was like, I was hoping we would get like 175, 200 people, and we got to like 400. And I was like, this is actually like, this is a thing. This is like, there's a real movement here. And I think seeing everybody in person and them being like this, like, physical manifestation of like years of everyone kind of building relationships and hanging out together. And it was like, everyone was so excited to see each other in person. I was like, man, I love working at Crossbeam and working on partner tech, but like for me personally, it was like, this gives me even more energy to see these folks in person building these relationships. And just, it was so good. Like, for anybody who was in Miami, what we're talking about, minus it being hot as crap outside. It was super humid, but everything else was awesome.
Yeah.
Says the guy from Georgia.
Yeah.
Real glad to
Denver this year for a reason.
I'm really happy about that move. That's a good one. And I think too, like thinking about my experience, I guess the tribe mentality, right? We haven't had a
Mhm.
tribe, we haven't had a group or a community up until then. Like I can remember in 2018, me and Asher spending like once a week on a call, just talking about partnerships and trying to, just figuring things out. I think, hell, he was probably a lean data back then, and
Yep.
talking with him and Jeff Coveney and Fabian Ekstrom and some of these guys that were, OGs in the space. Were like 5 of us that all knew each other, right? And now all of a sudden you've got this thing and you're putting in-person events together. And, I think that's part of too is like, how and why this is so necessary these days.
It's definitely one of those things that in the later half of last year, it was like things started snowballing, whereas like we had Catalyst, we started doing industry research, we had, successful sort of business processes around, okay, we do this much marketing, we can get this many members, we can, it's like we started to really run it like a SaaS company to some extent from a metrics perspective. And it was like we realized that we could still support our families and go work on this full time. And so I moved over first in November 2022. Asher shifted over in February. And we just have, Ty is still at Deal leading a huge program with like 50 partner managers. So, we're excited for any time we get from him. But I think this is like this year in particular was when we were like, okay, cool. Like we can really scale this up and start to do a lot more stuff because like the wheel is turning so much faster. Like today, we literally announced that Salesforce is going to be a key sponsor for Catalyst this year. And so like, we're going to get a ton of people from the Salesforce ecosystem coming. And it's like Microsoft added all those people. We have a great relationship with Amazon. So it's like, it's mind blowing a little bit to like go from a small, very small tribe, as you say, a few years ago to now, like we can actually really elevate the industry through all the different activities you're doing and all the members helping each other. Cause it's still at the root of it. Like it is a human to human thing where it's like one person talking to another person can literally change the life of that person. I'll give a shout out to Chris LeBois. He has met with so many members and he started doing these mastermind sessions, sharing what he learned at Gorgeous and some of the processes around tech partnerships and how do you drive more source revenue. And like seeing the output of the masterminds where he's met with people, like some people may have lost their jobs if they didn't implement the things they learned in these masterminds. And they would tell us that. They were like, you changed my career. And like, man, you get like goosebumps, you're like, oh, it's so good. Cause it's been a dark year for us in some cases, but people helping each other at the core of it is how we're getting through this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why we started this podcast. It's like they're people to people. That's the basis for everything. So we kind of touched on it. I mean, there's some few nuggets I could assume. COVID, it's been a terrible year in the economy. But if you are digitally savvy at all, you've seen a huge surge in communities. They're all serving different groups or professions, Rev Genius, PL, you name it. There's probably a community out there. So aside from the obvious, like connecting people to people, what else do you think is contributing to the rise of the community?
Yeah, there's probably two flavors or maybe three flavors we see out there. There's like the professional persona type of community. So Pavilion, Rev Genius, like think of any kind of go-to-market. They probably have a community that's like that exists at this point that would probably help serve them pretty well. You also have like the vendor communities where it's like a technology company realizes that they can add their customers and prospects to a place where those people can help support each other and learn about the product and all that good stuff. I'm in Uncommon Room, which is like a community for Common Room, which is a piece of community tech. And it's like, it's great. Like I can talk to other community people about how they do stuff. It's like, so I think that's like the second flavor. And the third one's like, there's obviously tons and tons of like volunteer free communities on all kinds of different topics out there. I think the one that I find most interesting, partially because I'm running a professional association, is like the sort of maturing of how do you build and operate one of these communities in a way that's, you're making revenue and can support expanding it. And like, it is very interesting because there's no models that everybody's following as a unanimous way of doing this. It's similar to partnerships in that sense. Like I think we're starting to like align. Like here's how you do tech partnerships, and here's how you might approach channel partnerships. In the community world, number one, the tooling didn't exist for a large part. And when I talk about community, I'm talking about like the usually Slack based, some kind of like
digital community.
forum, digital communities where it's like there's always been BBS boards and things like that, like news groups, etc. But it's
Reddit.
like, Reddit. Oh, I shed a tear for Reddit and all the challenges that have happened there in the last 6 weeks. Talk about community.
Wow, tough.
But I think like it is a very interesting time for the professional communities because I think what their purpose is starting to become more apparent, like, and I'll give you a good example of this, like in PL, like we've had a angel syndicate component to investing in partner tech companies. And so a number of the members would invest, and it's like, you never saw that in the traditional like industry associations per se. It's like, I think it's the fact that all these things are digital and there's people that are thinking about what the role of community could be for folks. You're seeing all these experiments to some extent of how do you create value for all these community members. And it's really cool. I mean, it's really exciting in that sense. And you can feel the energy when you go into these like Slack communities for the community management space where everyone's like running around trying out all kinds of stuff, including Web 3.0 and all kinds of like alternative ways to tokens, et cetera. So it's not boring.
Not at all. No. So as you begin to experiment and you're kind of leading down this track a little bit, as you are in these communities for communities, common room, uncommon room, what are you learning or what are you seeing about the future of communities and like where does this go from here? Because it's young, it's nascent, it feels like the early days of tech, and we know where we're at now with that. And so this is kind of fresh, it's new. Where do you see this going from here?
Yeah, I think like, and we see this in partnerships too. There's a lot of commonalities here. Business rigor is not always something that I feel like people are coming to the table from that background. Like I think there's a lot of people in community that they love the human side of it and they love like the feeling of helping people.
Exactly. That's what makes it special.
Yeah, which is great. It's like the it's the people with high EQs are a lot of times, community managers. And I think if you look at like the job growth opportunities, like even PL, like we're hunting for people that have a blend of like business professionalism and like, a lot of times working at SaaS companies in some capacity, and bringing that kind of rigor to also operate in the community. And so you have this interesting thing where it's like, you need to have high EQ where you can actually talk to the members and create a warm experience for them, but then like take the learning of the challenges that person has and scale up solving that challenge using data, diagnosing it the right way. And it's this interplay between those two skill sets that the faster that the community world can build those capabilities, like it's just going to scale a lot faster because we see a lot of thrashing happening where people who are passionate about community have amazingly good intentions, but they lack some of like how do you operationalize this as a company to actually make this so that it can be sustainable. And that's I feel like that's kind of the stage they're at. Is there's a ton of these folks that are struggling to some extent, and like tooling is helping. Like getting technology in place where you can actually manage these things more efficiently is helping. But I think there's great career opportunities, and we're hiring right now for a customer success leader, and like we have partner people that are applying for this role, which is great. It's like I think they can take their skill sets from the technology world in partnerships and apply it to being someone that works on a day-to-day to some extent in like a CS role. But again, kind of that chameleon thing of like you're evolving your skill set based on where the market demand is.
Yeah, there's every podcast. I'm like, can we spend another hour together?
I know why Rich Roll and Joe Rogan do 3-hour podcasts now.
Same.
Where it's like this interesting intersection of like, I'm in the partnerships world and there's a lot going on there, but you're also in the community world and you're like, there's a lot going on over there. And it's this is a fun podcast to some extent because I get to talk about both of them. But it's, I encourage anybody who's listening, like if you're striking out on finding an opportunity in the partnerships world, peek around in the community world, because there are some amazing business communities, especially, that are looking for talent right now. And like, that's a new surface area for you to potentially take your skill sets and grow a career around that.
Hot
Yeah,
tip.
I haven't thought about that one before, but that is a great hot tip. That actually works really well.
Yeah, it capitalizes on the chameleon thing. We don't fit into one bucket, so expand your reach and your horizons. So we've kind of touched on this, but as a community leader, as a member of many other communities, what advice do you have? How can you lower the barrier to entry to put yourself out there and network if that's not your strong suit or that's not your favorite thing to do? What would you say to people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're benefiting a little bit in PL from having people that are naturally a little bit outgoing, if you're in partnerships. But that being said, not everyone is engaging in a public fashion. I'd say like that's like the number one thing we see that results in success is like, you're probably working on a handful of problems and guaranteed there's a bunch of other people that are working on the same problem, but you'll never find each other if you don't put it out there that you're trying to work on scaling your reseller program or going into an international market or figuring out cloud marketplaces. So I'd say like being visible and being present and putting yourself out there is like the number one way to like elicit people to engage with you, especially if you add the right level of context. If you just put like a one sentence thing, you're like, I need resellers help, exclamation point. You're probably not going to get a lot of people engaging with you. But you can pattern match and look at folks that ask questions, but also give enough context, and they sort of are already giving back in a sense. Like some of the best questions I'll see are folks that are like, I'm trying to do this. Here's where I'm at so far. Anybody who's willing to collaborate with me, I'm more than happy to share what I've built so far. And like, maybe we can come back and share this with the community. And you kind of bring that human side of like, you want to answer your problem, but you also want to be able to share that back. Those folks end up in amazing conversations with other people, and they solve their problems a lot faster. So I think that's one of the most common things. And I'd say also like leverage the resources that are on the market. Like it kind of drives me a little bonkers when people are like, they're stuck on something, but they're unwilling to go and listen to the podcasts that are out there, like your podcast or any of the other ones that are there. Think about all the content that all the partner tech companies are building today. Like, you could probably literally spend a few weeks and get incredibly versed on partnerships just by investing time and reading all the goodness that's out there. And so like, and this is especially true for anybody who's like transitioning from the traditional channel partnerships world. Take the time to go learn from, what are all these tech partnerships that people are doing? What are these cloud marketplaces? Like, if you learn those things, you're going to get hired faster. Like, just to touch on kind of where we're at reality-wise is like, there's hundreds, if not thousands of partner professionals out of work right now. And the ones who are sort of have spent a long time maybe on just one type of partner program, they're not getting hired as quickly as folks who have a wider breadth of experience. But you can pick up a lot of those learnings and a lot of those different programs by going out and just reading a lot of the stuff that's available. And so like the people that do that, they get hired really quickly. Like I see people that get let go because their company had some traumatic event and they had to let folks go. And if you're kind of up to speed on what these programs look like, and you don't have to like have a ton of experience, but you at least got to have surface level knowledge of these things, you're going to get so much further in the interview cycle than someone just done, one type of partner program for the last decade at a company kind of thing.
Love that. That's really interesting. It's like the two things I took from that was to kind of put yourself out there and begin to network is one, being curious, like come to it with an element of curiosity. Two, learning, like consistent, constant learning, which oddly enough, funny is not a word, funnily is a word now, is kind of the two triggers, the two elements to peak performance and flow. I've talked about this on the podcast a couple of times. I'm reading a lot about this right now, but curiosity and learning. Those are the things that continue down the path of peak performance and how you continue to grow, find that state of flow, etc.
I love that.
I have one last random question. You can say pass if you want to, but this is not the final question. But in your conversation with the community members, helping to coach them to stay engaged in the community, have you had any conversations with those of like how they can overcome their fear of curiosity, if I may, or feeling embarrassed by asking silly questions? Have you had any of those interesting conversations?
Yeah, I definitely run into folks that are like, I'm a little nervous to ask that, or they feel like if they talk about it, they might be tipping off their competitor that they're even thinking about that type of partner program or that challenge area, which happens, So I think like it's like this is where the human side of this comes into play. Is sometimes if I talk to somebody like that and they're like they just for whatever reason can't post publicly, I keep a record of that, and I'm like, okay, who else do I know that's working on that kind of problem area? And we'll try to like match them actually and connect them to somebody on a more like a one-to-one basis. The alternative to that is like, if you don't want to have a public Slack conversation, would you want to get on a roundtable maybe, and we can probably find a co-host for it, and you can get into like a small group of 8 people where it feels a little, again, going back to that kind of like small group mentality. Does that sound intriguing for you? And that's like something that seems to work well is like, you're either going to be hopefully comfortable with the Slack channel or a roundtable or one-on-one connections. And if none of those make sense, like they're probably just not going to excel as quickly in their career as someone who's open to do that. So I feel like this is just one of those, like, you gotta grit your teeth and just get good at being openly curious and willing to engage with others. And like one last kind of thing of just like career guidance kind of thing. Don't wait until you get fired to build your network.
Amen.
100%. Yeah, take that one away. That's for sure. So can't express that. Can't sign off on that one enough. Cool.
Yeah, I think Jason, you had a change in career recently, and like you have invested in your network for years, and it was like I could see you moving around and very quickly finding opportunities for yourself. And like I just encourage anybody who's on this call, like take that time, 30 minutes a week, make sure you're staying connected, because you're going to be in a tough spot if something unforeseen happens and you don't have that network of folks available to help you.
That's it. I can't imagine a better place than right there. It's like we're all about building the purpose-built relationships, and that's it in a nutshell. So we'll wrap it here. We'll come with the final question. Now, Chris, we like to end with something that's kind of fun, engaging for the friends, outside of the norm. Sometimes they're silly, sometimes they're personal, whatever. This one, I'd like to ask you, if you had to recommend one book for the rest of your life to everybody you talk to, what book would that be?
Oh man, I feel like this would probably change every year because I read good books.
That's not the rule.
You can read as many books as you want. You can only recommend one.
Oh man. I'm like struggling to think of it. It's like if you only had one video game to play on an island, which video game would you bring? Like this feels like a hard.
It's a tough one.
Yeah,
I read so many different books as well. So to say, I'm not sure if I could actually give an answer. But
I'm like, if I think about like books that had the most impact on my life, or just kind of like changed the way I thought about things, like Guns, Germs, and Steel. Like I feel like that just kind of comes to mind as like something that. Like why does society look the way it does, and like kind of the human experience, like that kind of stuff I find super fascinating. So whether it's Guns, Germs, and Steel or something in that world of kind of like help you understand why human society is the way it is, like that kind of stuff gets me fired up. So it's a quasi answer for you.
Wrote that one down. I don't know. Okay, so let's make it more personal. Like if you had to recommend one book to a partner professional, is there one out there that you say this has the answers you're looking for?
I would this is like, I guess I think he has a book. So Skip Miller, I went through his training, his sales training. That and the Challenger sale really became essential things for me as a partner professional to like, as a challenger sales name implies, like you got to get comfortable with challenging people to get to the outcome you want, and then hopefully they want as well. And like that kind of any of that sort of sales training to be a really great, revenue leader for the business, having some acumen around those topics is going to pay dividends. And I think like that's another area where like if you didn't come out of sales, you may miss some of those kind of like Skip Miller training or other stuff like that, challenger sale. And so like maybe it doesn't matter as much like which one you pick up, but pick up one of them and start kind of getting a sense of what they're talking about, because you're going to use those skills for the rest of your life as a partner professional.
Absolutely. Guns, germs, from steel to challenger sale. Some fun beach reading there.
Relaxing. But it does bring us full circle to curiosity and keep learning. So I think that's an awesome takeaway. Chris, this has been so great. Thank you for all that you do for us as friends, but for the partner community. I mean, you've built such a community that both Jason and I know many of our friends find so much value in. So thank you. We really have enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure there will be many more, but that's it. We'll see you next time, friends.
Do, 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 do.